Good evening, everyone. Perfection is not about doing extraordinary things, but about doing ordinary things in an extraordinary manner. A very warm welcome to everyone for today's XLRI Industry Expert Connect series. Our guest speaker for today is a person who is defined as a perfectionist because of her strong devotion towards her work, and she's well appreciated for her warm and friendly personality. So on behalf of the batch of XLRI PGDM General Management Program, I welcome Ms. Ritika Mathur, our guest lecturer for today. Welcome, madam.
Thank you so much, Amit, for that very, very kind introduction. Not so sure about the friendly personality. My team might give you a different picture, but it's wonderful to be here to be in the midst of all of you at the what is a little bit of a a late evening. I hope I'm not spoiling your Friday evening plans.
No, no. We are almost every time engaged in the even at night we are engaged, so that is not an issue for
Wonderful.
us.
Great, great. It speaks volumes about how dedicated all of you guys are in terms of learning, and thank you for the opportunity. It's wonderful to connect with all of you. I'll start with a little bit of introduction about myself, giving you a little bit of history, and also set the context. I think we've got about an hour with all of you, so I don't want this to be, even though it might be called a guest lecture, it's not necessarily a lecture because I'm not here to teach. I think all of you, from a technical standpoint, know HR as a subject probably a little bit better than me as well, because you guys are so close to the academic side of things. I'm here to share with you the business side of things a lot more. I've got a couple of slides, but those are more for me to, just put structure to the conversation. But I'm going to take probably just 15 to 20 minutes sharing my thoughts. Rest, I would like to spend the time taking any questions that you may have, because that's, I think, the better use of the time together for you to really understand the other side of academics. The good thing is all of you already come from the knowledge of a business domain already, because I think most of you have a bit of, work X before you guys joined in. So that's a great thing. I think you'll be able to relate a little bit more to what I say, but I would like to spend probably just 15 minutes sharing thoughts, and then the rest, 45 minutes in terms of hearing from all of you. Is that good, Amit?
Yes, ma'am. That works.
Perfect, perfect. So let me just share my screen quickly and take it from there. One second. Let me know when it's visible. Can you see my screen yet?
Not yet, ma'am.
Okay. How about now?
It is showing that you have started the screen sharing. I think it should come online in a few minutes.
Is this good?
Still, it's loading.
Okay, so while it loads, let me start with a little bit of introduction about myself and the history for me. So my name is Ritika Mathur. I am currently the partner in what we call the Human Capital Consulting team in Grant Thornton, which is basically the people advisory team, or rather the people advisory business within GT. For all of those who might not be aware of Grant Thornton is basically an audit, tax, and advisory firm. We are almost 7,000 people strong in India, and have offices across 15 major cities across the country. Our primary business line, as I said, right, we are one of the largest professional services firms in India, and we offer expertise both on the compliance side around audit and tax advisory, and on the management consulting side, you've got a large business now really focusing on strategic advisory itself, right? I'm a part of the latter. I'm a part of the strategic advisory business, and I primarily take care of solving, or rather helping the clients solve some of the people strategy challenges, and those are the questions that keep coming up a lot more now, specifically post-COVID. So I've been with GT for over 9 years, which is like majority of my career, honestly. Before my current role, I also got a chance to be the chief of staff to the Grant Thornton India CEO, wherein I did a lot of these projects and a lot of people strategy advisory work for internal client, which is basically as an internal strategy role as well. And that's where the genesis of me really being a part of HR advisory came into being. The idea in the call today, what I'd like to share a little bit with you all would be how is it for two things. One is really the market trend, how the landscape of HR as a function is changing, and what is therefore expected of the future HR leaders, whether you get into an internal HR role or you go into people advisory side of things. What is it that you can expect that you essentially will be doing, right? Because oftentimes when you study theory, the applicability of it really becomes a question mark, right? If I'm studying, let's say, something around job evaluation, where does that really come into being? Where does it really play a part? If I'm studying about all of these org design models, where do they really form a part when it comes to real business, right? And that's what I'm going to share with you a little bit today, and also share with you how HR as a function has effectively changed in the last few years. So let me start with that itself. I think when we talk about HR function, right, we are all sort of well versed with what the traditional HR has been. But the move from HR, from the traditional HR now has become into strategic HR, really. And what does it really mean, right? So what does it mean when I say that the traditional HR functions no longer play the primary part, but it's essentially anybody who's coming as an HR leader, the expectation is to play this role of a strategic HR partner. Let me give you a few very important pointers to differentiate between the two so that becomes a little bit clearer for you. Traditional HR functions were in uh, history more operational in nature, right? So, for example, there are certain policies that have been created. The execution of those policies became the role of the HR leader. As opposed to what we are expecting now from our HR leaders to be a lot more transformational in nature, which basically means that you are not just focused on executing, you are actually taking a step back and seeing what is the impact that is creating within the organization. So it's not just the implementation part that becomes the responsibility of an HR leader, it's effectively even the design part of it, of things, which becomes a part of the HR leader. So if you're looking at performance management system, are you just responsible for you know uh, on a daily basis or on a quarterly basis just running the way the process is designed, or you're actually taking a step back, measuring the efficacy and impact of it, and then recreating it as well, right? So that's what the HR leaders are now expected to do. They are not just operational but more transformational in nature. Similarly, you're expected to be a lot more proactive. You're not just focusing on listening to what your seniors are saying, right? You're effectively at that stage or at that fulcrum in the organization where you are actually creating the change as an HR leader. And that's the biggest shift, in my opinion, in the last few years. You're not expected to follow, you're expected to lead from the front. Traditionally, HR was always expected to be like a cost center, that okay, you're getting people, they're all cost to the company, they're not really adding to the bottom line. But now businesses are a lot more, they're realizing that the largest cost and therefore the largest variable that makes a impact on their bottom line are basically their people, right? So therefore you need to invest in your people, and therefore the function that manages those people to be able to actually create an impact. So there are organizations wherein HR function has a very, very clear mandate both for top line and bottom line, because we see there is a direct impact on the business which the HR function creates. With the piece that I already spoke to you about, it's not about following anymore, it's about initiating transformation, right? Very, very important. Now HR function cannot say that we don't understand the business. If you're in an EPC firm or if you're in an infrastructure firm, you can't not understand the business. You need to understand what is the cyclicity, for example. You need to understand how is it that certain skill sets are needed for certain parts of businesses, because you are the one who's, let's say, creating a recruitment strategy. So therefore businesses, and like I was mentioning on as well, right, there are organizations which are creating or putting very tangible business targets for HR functions as well. And that's what's expected now from the HR teams to really be, and it's more important, in fact it's a lot more critical for HR functions to understand all sorts of businesses, right? If a company has heterogeneous, if it's a conglomerate, for example, you need to understand different kind of businesses that the organization is in, so you can create strategies that will fit into those kind of businesses. So that's one of the largest changes that is expected of HR function. And the last piece, like I was mentioning earlier also, you're not just focused on execution anymore. You're focused on creating strategy which will impact the execution. So that's how the landscape has changed. And whenever you are getting into the zone, or whenever you are getting into the market, wherein you are showing your value as a, as an HR business partner or an HR leader, these are things that you need to keep in mind, because the latter part is what people are expecting for you to play, right? And that is what will really help you accelerate your career growth. The former will help you. I mean, I think you will be there, but you will always hit a ceiling, but the latter is what will help you really migrate into something which is a lot more strategic in nature, a role which creates a lot more business impact and shows the visibility within the organizations as well. Moving into really understanding where, so now we have spoken about how the HR function has changed. Now let's talk about, the entire landscape. Where is it at? What different milestones does the HR function really come into picture, right? So if you talk about the life cycle of an employee, right, this is something that you guys will already probably be aware of. So I'll very quickly talk through. So you start with hiring talent, right? Then you essentially look at developing talent. So this is talent management effectively. Then there is an entire aspect around rewarding them. Then how do you develop and maintain talent, right? How do you retain it? And the last piece is essentially when the organ, when at the stage where where the employee might be ready to exit. How do you create that employee experience wherein even if they leave the organization, you are essentially helping them be promoters for you as they go out in the market. Um, some of the shall I say solutions that come into picture at every stage, and I wouldn't say that this is something which is like one-on-one mapping, but majorly how the kind of solutions that come into picture are at the first stage really understanding talent acquisition, right? Are you putting in the right people at the right place in the right time? And some specifics that you need to learn about at that stage is about induction and onboarding, about how you do assessment, right? So these are things that you would have probably read in theory, but this is how you can map it to the employee life cycle in the very real business sense, right? Then about talent management. Um, this piece honestly is one of the most strategic in nature, right? So really, how are you creating the right kind of structure within the organization which is aligned to strategy? So you articulate the vision, then you communicate it to the people. That also forms a part of HR department, by the way. A lot of people get surprised that creating a vision and creating strategy within the organization is not necessarily the HR team's function. We are told that this is the structure, now you create processes around it, but that's not true. In 80% of the engagements that we work on, we actually start from that cornerstone. The organizations articulate their strategy using, let's say, a balanced scorecard methodology. Then we create an org design which is aligned to it. And that is very much an HR function, because that's where you are expecting for your people machinery to really be aligned to how your strategy is, right? And then also bring in the clarity, because those are the kind of things that help you develop the talent within the organization. Performance management is what impacts your reward, right? So just talking about compensation structure and following a one size fit all approach when it comes to incentives and benefits is no longer the norm. You really have to go deeper into understanding what all things move your employees. And therefore we talk about total rewards. I don't know how many of you might have heard that statement or that terminology, but total rewards is the norm, right? Which is basically encompasses everything. It encompasses your benefits, which are your sometimes your intangibles, the compensation, your rewards, which are your tangible monetary incentives. Then you also talk about recognition, right? People are not always empowered by the monetary or the non-monetary benefits and compensation they get. Even recognizing somebody and sharing that feedback at large, how do you create frameworks around it? That's the performance management piece that HR functions typically work around. Learning and development really is, it's a no-brainer. That's always been and will always remain the primary area of work for HR. I think the major difference in my experience that I have seen in this is that this is more bottom up now than top down. And what therefore it means is that The HR function has to be a lot more proactive in understanding what is changing at the ground level when it comes to skill requirements from businesses perspective as well, and even from people's perspective, right? For example, during work from home, right? Creating the right kind of training modules, for example, for people to make them a lot more technology savvy, make them a lot more technologically literate, would have become the expectation from an HR team, right? But that you will get to know only when you have the pulse of your employees. And that is where the piece that I was talking about, HR being transformational in nature, really comes into picture. And the last piece is even employee experience, right? It's no longer okay to just run a survey at the end of the year. The expectation from the HR team is to really have the pulse of your employees in terms of what is what is moving them, what's their concerns. Um, I hope it's not getting to a monologue, but I think I'll try and wrap it up in the next 5 minutes so I can open it up for questions. And some of the things that I would definitely like to point out are more in terms of tech trends, right? So we talked about how the landscape for the HR function is changing. It's equally important for you to know what's out there in the market when it comes to technology, right? Because traditionally, HR functions were more the laggards when it came to technology adoption. But now, if you will see the market, and I think all of you might have gotten inducted into it, but you would see a lot like a plethora of HR tech companies focusing on one domain itself, right? For example, talent acquisition. It's a huge domain in itself, and you will see n number of organizations coming up with technology which is integrating things like AI in talent acquisition. You can These organizations are partnering with some of the larger organizations in sourcing resumes, automating the reading it, and basically doing the preliminary screening. Why it's important for you to know? It's because as and when you will work in some of these larger organizations, all of you are passing out from XLRI, so we can expect for you to join in some of large multinationals. They expect for you to be aware of these things. They expect for you to be aware of what is out there in the market when it comes to some of these key areas and key functions of HR, right? When it comes to the key HR trends, some of the things that I can share with you today, and we're happy to take any questions that you may have later, is first, of course, talent acquisition is one domain where tech is the most prominent, right? You're talking about AI-based interview, filtering CVs, looking at sourcing talent as well. What are the best, web scraping in terms of really identifying what could be the areas. Talent acquisition has been one of the major areas wherein there has been induction of technology. The other area is in L&D, right? You are no longer going into those pre-filled forms and modules of training. There is gamification within training itself. You're talking about usage of virtual reality. We have done that in our firm as well, and I can tell you the engagement in those trainings versus in some of the traditional training modules is very different. And that's why as HR leaders, you need to know that, okay, if you're seeing a less engagement, what are the tools that you can tap into, right? Also in terms of HR operations, like I said, if you are expected to become a transformational leader, you are also therefore expected to reduce your bandwidth that is going into some of the operational roles, right? And therefore, understanding the usage of the tools that helps you automate some of your operational tasks will become an expectation from you, right? So things like payroll, things like attendance, things like leave management. HR is not expected to actually go ahead and execute these things. What is expected is you have an understanding of what are the tools available in the market for you to be able to actually adopt them and get it on board as well. And even from an employee experience perspective, how are you ensuring that the data for employees is secure? How are you managing productivity? All of these things, these are 3-4 areas wherein I could really pinpoint, wherein uh, there is a lot of adoption of technology, and something that I would urge for all of you to read more about. Because when you do get into those interviews, when you do get into those discussions, recruiters will expect for you to have some knowledge about, about all of these tech trends in some of these areas, and therefore what ideas can you bring onto the table in being able to automate some of the areas around HR. I think I'll quickly. So this was very quickly. I think I'll take you through, like I was talking about in the beginning of times when we are talking around academics, right? the first question that comes into picture is really, what does all of this mean? How is it that I'm going to even be able to adopt it in our real business scenario? Is this something, and this is something that happened to me, a lot of things that I studied in theory, I could really not engage with a lot of it because I did not see the applicability of it, right? So today I thought I'll probably talk to you about 3 or 4 business problems and talk to you about some of the academic solutions that you're learning today and how the two match. So you can think about, okay, this is how the real corporate business problems really work. And therefore, as strategic HR business partners, how do you translate those business problems to come up with a solution? So some, for example, that we work with very closely is, most of the organizations that come to us have a very, very standard issue that we are, let's say, reforming our strategy, but we also need to make sure that our people machinery or the organization is really aligned to be able to deliver on that strategy. And there, the solution that we bring into picture is really helping them on organized design. Do you create a hierarchical matrix? Do you create a helix model? Do you create a matrix organization? All of these things, the academic knowledge about it, help you solve some of the real business problems around how do you create a people machinery which is aligned to the strategy of the organization as well. Things around how do you ensure people have clarity, right, in terms of their roles and responsibilities. The simple answer to it is very, very well defined JDs which have the KRAs, right? Sometimes when you learn about it and you say, you know what, this is just a document, what is it that we need to learn about it? But the actual business problem that that simple solution solves is a huge one. And believe me, 50 to 60% of the organizations that we work with, no matter how large, don't really have just the basic JDs in place. And that's what creates issues for people in terms of even having clarity in terms of what are the responsibilities, right? How do you enable a culture of feedback and transparent evaluation? This is literally the standard question that we have been asked from our clients. And the simple answer to that, in terms of the solutions that we offer and what you would have learned in your academics also, is how do you design a performance management architecture, right? Going deep into it and understanding what are the tenets that are involved in designing a performance management architecture is an answer to how do you enable a culture of feedback and transparent evaluation. And the last piece, for example, could be how do you bring in parity in designations and pay scales? And the answer to that is something which is a very technical subject, which is around job evaluation, right? Doing a job evaluation actually helps your organizations in bringing in parity in designations. So if I were to summarize all of the pieces that I shared with you today, there are a couple of messages that I would want to leave you with before we open up for questions. I think one would be really for you to assess and understand the difference, like I had mentioned, about strategic versus transformational HR. Because as management grads, when you get onto to your recruiters who you would be talking to, or when you get onto organizations where you will be working as HR leaders, like I had mentioned in the very beginning itself, right? The expectation is for you to become transformational leaders rather than focusing on the execution part of things. And to ensure that the execution and the hygiene factors are taken into account, you also need to be aware of what are the market trends, right? What is it that some of your competitors, some of the market leading companies are doing, and being able to adopt technology. Because today, HR leaders are at the fulcrum of everything else that happens within the organization, whether you talk business, whether you talk employee experience, whether you talk top line and bottom line, right? You are the one who enables all of it. And therefore, everything that impacts your business also needs to be amalgamated into your knowledge of HR within the organization, right? So really understanding technology, being the front runners when it comes to adoption in the technology, that is something that change management happens through the HR team itself, right? And therefore, from a market perspective, very important for you to be aware of it. And lastly, think solution. Oftentimes, like I said, we talk about uh, our academics first, but that's why I showed you that last slide, that it's very important for you to understand the problem statement to then identify what of your academic knowledge can be fit into things. So therefore, the last very important piece that I would talk to you and leave you with is understand the business problem first. and then try and apply your academic knowledge to what is it that will solve that business problem rather than the other way around, because that is what will help you really make into those transformational leaders. So I'll just stop my monologue here and open it up for any questions you may have. I hope you found that useful. And over to you, Amit and Andrew.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Ritika. Whatever you were saying, I could completely relate to, because even for a traditional manufacturing organization, from where I come, I used to work for Honda, and I have worked for all the other small OEMs also. They used to keep the track of all the attendance, and other employee leave management was done through placard or in
Yeah,
Excel. So they are also
yeah,
moving towards SAP. So this is what we can see, that even the traditional industries are also adapting to the use of technology. And the business problems that you were sharing, that regarding all the job analysis part, that is something that we have learned in the second term also. The job evaluation part, the job analysis part, which consists of all your job evaluation, job compensation, and your job description. So how that is very important, so that we can get the perfect match between the job roles and the skill sets that the employee has. So that is completely relatable. And we are also, I think we have also reading the star model, I think, where the strategy the alignment is needed between the elements of all the elements, such as your strategy, people, reward, and your structure. So that kind of alignment is very necessary, so that the organization can move forward. So that was very helpful. I think that will help other people to understand the subjects more clearly, so once you have shared the business problem. So with this, I think we will open the house for question. I think already people have raised their hands. So
yes,
okay,
yes.
Ayush, can you please take this question? Take your question. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, Ritika. Thanks for
Yeah.
insightful session and that too on Friday evening. So my question is, how do companies retain talent in times of great resignation, and what was the strategy of Grant Thornton?
Yeah, perfect. Wow, Ayush, I think you've got a question which can take another 1 hour for me to answer, but I'll try and be very succinct about it. See, when you talk about employee retention, let me be very candid about it. Employee retention at the end of the day is an outcome of many factors. As an employee, you don't decide on one day that you are ready to leave, right? It's a function of many things that kind of pile up. Some of it are push factors, some of it are pull factors. The pull factors you can't do much about because they're out of your control, right? If another organization is offering a role, right? If today you are in manufacturing, but you decide that you manufacturing is not for you, you want to get into professional services, that is a pull factor, right? That the manufacturing organization can't really do about. But the push factors are the ones that are really important for the organization to understand. So I'll take the example of Grant Thornton itself, right? Although I work with a lot of other organizations, because Grant Thornton's employee experience is handled by the internal HR team, but I can share with you because I was a part of the internal strategy team as well. Um, Two, three things. One was a culture of regular feedback was very important, both to the employee and from the employee, to really pinpoint where the challenges were, right? One of the things that we took a conscious call was that oftentimes the natural inclination is to say that, okay, somebody is going, let's increase the compensation. But that's a very temporary fix. That's a band-aid to a problem, right? The challenge really happens is not around compensation, because you might be able to retain that person for another 6 months by increasing compensation. But what about next? The question is, are you creating a career path for them? Are you hearing them? What are the challenges? Are you creating tangible benefits? So during COVID, for example, right? I think as a firm, we had the lowest attrition rate in the entire industry, and post that as well. The simple reason for it was that we created a theory, a practice of people over profits. We were the only organization which did not have any pay cuts. We did not have any layoffs, because at that point of time, we took a call as a group that, okay, this is a family that we really need to nurture. And that kind of philosophy sort of really, cascaded down for years to come as well. It's been 3 years, 2 years since, since that entire situation. And we are seeing the benefits of that even today. And that is and that kind of helped us even in the policies that we created, right? We created flexibility in the way we work. So we are not we are a virtual first organization right now. So if I decide that, okay, I have domestic responsibilities and I don't necessarily need to go to office and can work from home, I have that flexibility. So, we created a framework that really listened to people and did not just focus on compensation. And I think the cornerstone of that was really doing regular feedback sessions with the employees to see what motivates them, what are the concern areas. We have a regular session with our CEO every month, which is an open house, so people can come and have questions from them from the CEO, and he directly answers them in a rapid fire format as well. So very easily or rather summarize the answer to your question, there have been small little changes that we have made in the way we interacted with our people that have actually helped us retain people over the course of the time, and not just focus on the compensation side of things.
So
And
is
that's the message that we give to our clients as well. Go down to the before we start looking into the solutioning side of things, do a deep dive into what are the challenge areas by doing, let's say, simple questionnaire, simple survey and FGDs with people to understand where the concern areas might be.
So
And
basically, it's all about culture, which you develop over the
culture,
period of time.
absolutely, culture is, I think, the cornerstone. But simply saying culture, it's a very 30,000 feet answer. I think really breaking it down, what do you want your culture to say? How do you define it, and how do you communicate it to your people? That's, I think, also very important.
That's answer my question. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ayush.
Next, I think Imran is there. So Imran, you can ask a question.
Sure. Thank you, Amit. Thank you, Ritika, for your insightful session. I have a question on the companies are moving towards technology in the HR function also, which holds a lot of employees' data. Thus, how are companies dealing with the data loss or privacy in transition when they're moving?
Right. So there are two parts to your question, Imran. I think one is comprehension itself, right? The understanding what laws are important when it comes to people data. So if your organization works across Europe, GDPR comes into picture. If your organization is within India, there are, even within companies apps, there are compliances that you really need to be focused around. So I'll break it into two things. One is really understanding what compliances you need to be a part of, and ethically what are your responsibilities. Educating people who handle that data around that is very important, and that's the first thing, the cornerstone of making sure you've got a safe and secure data privacy part. The second piece which organization do, and I'm not going to talk about the technology implementation side of things because that's a completely different ball game altogether, but really having the right kind of governance in place, right? Are you doing an internal audit on a regular basis in terms of whether your tools, your platforms, and your policies are in accordance with what your laws dictate, right? Are you making sure that your servers do not have any kind of leakage? Are you making sure that you've got like an ombudsman in place, which is really taking into picture or taking into account some of the whistleblower complaints that might be coming onto it, right? So really, how do you get ahead of any kind of risk mitigation is the other piece that is very important. So to summarize, education and governance, beyond, of course, the right kind of technology adoption, these two things are what's the most important for organizations to stay ahead of any kind of risks that come in terms of data privacy as well. Does that answer your question, Abraham?
Yeah, it does answer. So it's basically the governance model that should be strong enough, and the people that you take in should be compliant with that.
Yeah. And when I talk about governance, it encompasses not just creating the right kind of policies, but also holding people accountable. If you see that there are, leakages, what are you doing to make sure that you get the message across that this is not an acceptable norm, right? So leading by example in that front is something that we always tell our clients to do, because any kind of shall I say, leniency there does not really augur well for whoever is essentially taking care of that particular piece.
Okay, yeah, that perfectly answered, because in my last organization also, it was like that if there was any red flags, you can raise directly to the managing director. Yeah. You don't need to go to the hierarchy also.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Next, Sanjeevni, you can go ahead and ask a question.
Yeah, hi Ritika. Thank you for such a wonderful session. So my question is that what can we as future managers can do to promote gender diversity and make sure that people get over their unconscious biases to create the inclusive culture across the team and company?
Great question. And I think I would probably go beyond just gender diversity, and talk about diversity in general, right? Diversity in general talks about multiple things. It's not, it could be language based, it could be geography based, it could be religion based as well, right? How do you make sure that you create a culture wherein people are uh, heard, acknowledged, and included? I think we are at the stage 2 of our diversity and inclusion journey, wherein as a generation of organizations, we have moved beyond just making, just the awareness of the fact that diversity is important. I think anybody that you talk to today understands that diversity is the cornerstone of making sure that you're it's an important, it's a very tangible area that you need to work towards. Where I think we need to now move towards is making sure that the environment is conducive enough for that diversity to really foster, right? Because I think the point that you had mentioned about unconscious biases, uh, that is the piece that is most important for us to really target. I'll give you the example of what we have done within GT, and then I can give you an example of what we did for our clients as well. So we actually did a series of workshops to make people aware of what their unconscious biases could be, right? And we actually put people on spot there, because what really helped us was not giving theoretical sessions, but really making people themselves understand that they've got unconscious biases within them, right? We did role plays with them. We had an external facilitator actually come into place, and they really helped a lot of us realize that we've got those unconscious biases that we need to be aware of, right? It's not an overnight change. You can't do it over a series of one workshop wherein you tell people, okay, you should not say these things to somebody who is, let's say, coming in for a specific region within the country. uh, it's a gradual change. So I think education and creating awareness to really make sure that those kind of realizations become a part of people's DNA and language. That is what organizations need to work towards. And I think, in my experience, communication is the best way around it. How do you create a series of regular communication to keep reminding people that this is the right way to go, this is not the right way to go? That, in at least for us, has been the most effective, and this is something that we do for our clients as well. How do you regularly do a session with people to make sure that they are aware of some of their unconscious biases?
Yeah, that answers my question. Thank you.
Sure.
Gagan, please go ahead.
I'm audible.
Hi, Gagan. Yes, you are.
Hi, Ritika. First of all, thank you for taking out your precious time on Friday evening and giving us some good developments on HR, strategic HR. So thank you for that. My question is related to the technological developments which you have actually also mentioned. So as we know that automation is being used by most of the companies right now. So it might be creating some fear in the employees. Okay, so how do you convince them? Like, how do you motivate them to move towards those things, and they don't what do you call, they don't force it, that they don't force that change, that we don't want that change. So how do you convince them to move without changes as an HR, and how as managers we can uh, motivate our teams?
So when you talk about technological advancements, you're talking about some of the trends within HR itself. You're talking about how do you create that change management in general technological
in,
trends,
in,
making sure people
in
adopt.
general, like in my company, I remember many people, they were moved from like more of laborious work to automated work. So they had that fear in their mind that, okay, we might be sacked sooner or later. So how, as an HR, like what has been your strategy to
Yeah.
retain those kind of people and motivate them to go for those changes?
Okay. So let me give you a caveat. HR function alone can't do it, right? So if you talk about change management as a philosophy, right? Change management has multiple aspects to it. It's never run by one single function. So for example, let me take an example. Let's say you're in a manufacturing firm, right? There is a production department which is essentially looking into there's a certain format of creating rosters, of actually getting people onto ships. There is a new machine that is involved. There is a new capex that has been put into place, and people are needed for two things. One is there are some automated tasks that were part of people's actual portfolio which has been taken out because this new machine is really working on it. And the second thing is actually reskilling people really in terms of usage of those things, right? Now HR team in its silo can't go and tell people that, you know what, this is how you should do it, because what it will do is it will become a theoretical, you don't want to give yarn to people, right? You basically want to make sure that one, people have the confidence that this is not there to take their jobs, specifically at that point of level. Second, you also have to explain to them what is in it for them, right? So let me take, a very similar example, even in the HR front, right? If there are people sitting in your payroll function to whom you say that, you know what, we are taking away the Excel file that you are doing, we are actually bringing in a new payroll tool. If you were in that function, you have to empathize with them to see it is going to create, create a little bit of, shall I say, concern in terms of, okay, what does this mean for me, right? There two role holders will come into picture. One, the person who this person is reporting into, to really give them clarity. What does this change really mean for them, right? What is the direction for them as they go forward? And then the enablers as HR function to really tell them and have those regular connects with them that, okay, are you, is there any concern? Have you had a chance to meet with your line manager? Have you had a chance to meet with your reporting manager? Do you understand what is happening? So those communications can be enabled by the HR team, but at the end of the day, uh, just the HR team going and telling people in terms of, that this is what's happening now, you should adopt the change, it's not going to really help, right? And that's the entire point of change management, that how functions collaborate together to be able to drive that change, and the HR team essentially initiates that and is the enabler to be really able to facilitate that change. But I think it's a wrong expectation to have that the HR team is essentially going to be the one who will make sure that all of these people will come on board, because if you are not really on a regular basis interacting with that person, anything that you say is always going to come across as theoretical to them, right? So when you guys take on those projects, please be mindful in terms of what is the expectation that you are saying yes to. If anybody expects for you to be single-handedly going and driving change management, it's a recipe for failure. You have to collaborate with service lines and functions to be able to drive change management the right way. I hope that answers the question, Gagan.
Oh yes, Ritika, it does. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Next, I would request Vijankesh. You can ask your question. Thank you.
Hi, Ritika. Thank you for your time.
Hi.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I have a question regarding gamification you have mentioned. Like, I understand it can be used in learning through like rewards and badges systems and like keeping track of progress. But is there a way it can be used for team building efforts, like creating a sense of belonging for the employee in the company?
Very interesting question. I wouldn't call myself the expert on what all gamification can do, honestly, Vijesh, but I can share with you some of the use cases wherein we have helped clients, or where is it that we have seen gamification really being used beyond L&D side of things. I think a large part of what we do within the team, which brings, a sense of cohesion, is really even on project management side of things, right? If there are if you've got a team of 10 people and you meet in a weekly huddle to really define, oh, these are the things or the initiatives that we want to do together as a team, gamification in creating, let's say, a simple dashboard in terms of, how has the team performed. Are we doing, are we doing well together? Are we, as a team, how far are we from what our defined goals were? Gamification, I've seen gamification being used in those kind of trackers and dashboard to be able to give that sense of purpose to people, and saying that, okay, you know what, the team is X miles away from the goal at this point of time. How is it that I run forward to make sure the team reaches there, right? So that kind of ownership. A very, very simple example I'll give you. we as a, so in my previous team, we decided that all of us together need to get fit. Okay. And we launched this campaign of basically saying that the team every day together should do 20,000 steps as together, not an individual, but together, right? And therefore there were weightages defined for everybody. And there was an entire gamified model that was created around it. Every single day, we used to, all of us were given a pedometer, and that fed directly into that model. And every single day, there were teams of 5 or 6 people that were made, and multiple teams that were there, right? So if there was someone lacking, saying that, you know what, I have not done enough of my steps, the entire team would lag behind. And then there were, literal brick bats given to all of us that, what the hell are you doing? Get up. So we were made to get up at 10 p.m. at night to actually go in for a run or for a walk, right? So that created that sense of ownership, that created that sense of bonding by teams together working around it, right? So the use case can be many, right? Use cases can be like gamification can be used in literally anything at that point of time. During this conversation, we can use a gamified model to assess the engagement. How engaged are you, all of you, to listen, listening to me? But I think there as well, my answer to your question would really be understanding how is it that you can create gamified models that take the team together and talks about progress of the team together and not just individuals. Because L&D is more focused about individual learning, individual growth.
Yes. Thank you.
Sure.
Akshay, you can ask a question now.
Hi Ritika,
Hi.
Akshay here. So actually, I was going through the news and I got a news that Grant Thornton has lost deal values of 4.1 billion, which is actually half. So in such cases, does HR
Which country
strategies for
was
future workforce?
Which country was this in?
India, Grant Thornton Bharat.
Okay, what's the news, if you can tell me?
Deal values halved to 4.1 billion in August 2022.
You're talking about the deal tracker inside?
Yeah.
Okay.
So in
And
such,
can you tell me? I think I'm just missing the context here.
Acha, no. So the context which is suppose whatever you are earning, or whatever your source of earning is there, and if you lost or there are some issues with that, then does your HR strategy regarding future workforce will change, or whether you will be adapting those changes, or you will wait for 1 or 2 more quarters to check, and after that you will take the decisions.
Are we talking from a business perspective, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. So first thing, just to clarify, the deal tracker does not talk about the deals that are lost by Grant Thornton. It talks about just the general transactions universe, right? How many deals in general Indian companies have gotten into. I'm not sure if that's the one but we can connect offline in terms of the which specific news that we were talking about. But I understand the context of your question. I think you're saying if your bottom line does not allow, or if your top line does not allow, how do you make sure that you reward your people, or how do you make sure that you follow status quo when it comes to rewarding your people, or maintaining the kind of compensation and the number of workforce that you have, right? Is that a question?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. It's a very difficult question for me to answer right now straight up, right? Because so I'll give you an example that I was quoting earlier, and I can say here from a GT perspective, right? During COVID, that was a very, very real scenario for us, wherein a lot of the kind of work that we were doing, specifically on the consulting side, stopped. Because most organizations, for them, some of the work that we were doing was discretionary spend. That was more when you were looking from a growth perspective. During COVID, everybody was in survival modes, right? So that kind of work kind of stopped for us. And a large part and impact was created on the bottom line as well, right? The kind of revenues that we earn, and that was a reality across the industry. There are two ways the organizations face, and there's no right or wrong answer to it, right? There are organizations across the board which were themselves, finding it difficult to survive. They did cut their workforce. For us, we were a largish organization. We took a conscious call of putting people over profits. What did that mean? That meant that we are saying So our strategy there was that all of our partners, we took a slight pay cut, right? We said that, okay, we are going to make sure that the people who sort of run our organization are at least rewarded the basics that they need to. And so we'll take a small pay cut, which will be a deferred earning for us, while the people were all paid 100%. So we were among the very few organizations that made sure there were increments that were still given, that made sure that there were no leaks that happened because of COVID, right? The other organizations who were probably smaller in scale, who did not have enough sustain, who actually went across and had to cut workforce. And it was a reality. It was a sad reality, but it was a reality. So I don't think when you talk about HR strategy, you can use the same, you can give a one size fit all answer. It has multi-layered repercussions, each one of them. But yes, if you talk about ethical practices, about the right practices that have helped organizations grow over future, is to keep a long-term vision, not really take short-term decisions that probably impact your bottom line today, but cause long-term repercussions. That's the answer we give to our clients, and that is the mindset with which we help them define their strategies and their people strategies as well. So I think the simple answer for you would be that you really review whether your revenue decline is a short-term blip or it's a long-term. If it's a long-term problem, then of course you have to relook at your business model, and that would mean restructuring, right? But if it's a short-term blip, then we always suggest to create strategies which can help you sail through without causing a large long-term business impact in negative sense.
Okay.
I don't know, Akshay, if that answers your question. It's a little broad for me to answer.
Yeah, so
but,
basically when it is a short term issue, then we'll not try to change our workforce or cut down it, but
we'll
we'll
attempt to do something that doesn't cause disruption as much. But if it's a long-term
okay,
thing wherein you need to relook at the entire workforce or
then we have
your
to
business
restructure.
model, then it's inevitable.
Yeah, okay, that answered my questions. Thank you.
Yeah.
Shayan, you can go ahead and ask a question now.
Hi, Ritika. Thank you for the session.
Sure, sure.
My question was, I recently read that Cyan's Analytics was acquired by Equity Knowledge Partners, and Grant Thornton Bharat was the exclusive transaction advisor.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what role does HR strategy play when these companies are getting acquired, and what would GTB's role be in that?
Yeah, no, very good question. I think I don't know how much you understand about the deal life cycle, but let me throw a little bit light there, right? So before you get into the actual deal strategy, you start with something which we call due diligence itself, right? So due diligence happens on multiple levels. Beyond looking at the books of the organization, you also look at the intangibles, the kind of goodwill that the organization has, what the kind of brand value does it have, what is the kind of IP that they have, and also in terms of what is the kind of workforce that they have, right? What is the kind of team? Are there skill sets which are things that can be integrated within the organization that is acquiring, or is it something that you will have to find another role for, right? Deals could be multiple ways. One is you are acquiring an organization with the purpose of acquiring assets, which also includes people. The other is you're acquiring just the assets and effectively, are looking to restructure, adopt people, but in different roles as well. Depending on the objective of the deal is how your HR really comes into picture, right? Uh, how GT helps, I'm not going to talk about the buy side as HR or the sell side HR. I'm going to talk about the HR advisory team that works along with the deal team here, right? So first role that we end up playing is really at the time of due diligence itself, looking at the verification, specifically of the KMPs, as we call the key management personnel, doing a thorough due diligence on them, making sure that their knowledge, their technical skills, specifically if you are hiring a company for its assets and for its people, right, making sure that the competencies that they bring onto the table are the right ones to forms a part of the due diligence itself. Then when we are talking about the deal strategy, right, depending on what is the objective. See, if the objective is that we need to integrate, then your HR team will essentially put down the tenets which are needed from a change management perspective, make sure that the critical talent in the organizations don't leave, right? So creating the right kind of structure, creating the right kind of policies, even the compensation structures, because a lot of people, KMPs, for example, who are coming on board in the new organization, there will be some equity transference to them. So how does the tax part works? How does the equity transference work? How do you create frameworks around ESOPs, etc.? All of those things come into picture. If it's the latter, where you are saying that you are only acquiring them for the purpose of assets, and you're okay for them to, come on board, but would need to get them integrated into other roles, really doing a competency assessment and what else can they do wherein they will fit in, and really doing the change management, because there's a lot of heartburn that happens in this on the buy side specifically. So helping that seamless transition becomes the role of the HR team itself, right? So I think broadly, these are two areas wherein the HR advisory really comes on board. Post-merger is a different ballgame altogether, right? Post-merger, ensuring that the larger organization gets the message, there's the right kind of communication, the right kind of org structure in place. Throughout the entire deal life cycle at different milestones, the HR team or other people advisory team really comes into the picture. Sharon, I hope that summarize some part of the question that you
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Sure.
Ritika, sorry, we're already over time, so are you willing to take one more question? Or
Yeah, I have I think 10-15 minutes. So in case you guys you have any further questions, happy to take those.
I think Shivang, we can take one last question with Shivang, and then we can close, I think. So Shivang, please.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ritika, for coming.
Sure.
And I think most of the questions have answered a little, but I would really like to know, because as Grant Thornton is considered to be a challenger to the Big Four, so what do you think its competitive advantages in terms of talent it attracts and nurtures?
Okay. Interesting question. I wouldn't talk about competitors in general. I would talk about, I have about 12 years of experience, of which 9 years I've spent on Grant Thornton, and I was with 2 other firms before this. So you can see the turnaround rate, right? In 3 years, I changed 2 jobs. In 1 job, I've been in for 9 years. But in GT also, I changed roles 3 times, right? Not because I wasn't hopefully good at the other role that I was playing, but because I, as a person, am curious in nature, and I wanted to explore and expand in terms of what I do, right? I was in the Big Four organizations before I joined GT. One of my primary reasons of leaving that organization was because of the fact that this particular thing of being able to really explore what more I can do, putting my hand up and being able to make change happen by myself, even though I probably don't bring in the number of years that was needed. That did not exist in that organization, and nothing to, I mean, it's a great organization, wonderful people, policies there, but that organization was a mammoth in itself, and therefore there were a lot of bureaucratic steps that one needed to follow to be able to make any change happen. And as a culture, they were focused a lot more on if things are happening, don't change, right? So 2 pieces here, right? So when you talk about market, why is it that GT calls itself a challenger brand? Let me give you that answer first, and then I'll talk from a people side of this, right? For us, the market is very different, right? We don't necessarily proactively go behind listed companies or large multi-billion dollars MNCs, right? We go behind the kind of organizations that are the cornerstone for Indian economy, which is your mid-sized promoter and organization. There is nobody in the market who understands that segment as well as we do, right? My majority of work actually happens with promoter and organizations which are at the cusp of becoming multi-million dollar organizations in the next few years, are really wanting to professionalize the way they're set up, right? We are a family-run organization ourselves, so we really understand that aspect of what are the ground realities that come into it. So that's why we call ourselves challenger brand, because we don't even compete in the segment that some of the larger firms really do. Not because we don't have the capability, but we've got a gap of our white space, and that's what we want to service a lot more. On people side of things, I think that particular agility that is required in the market gets reflected as well, right? So I wouldn't brag about GT, honestly, that's not what we are here for. But since you asked the question, 2-3 things that have worked for me personally. One, your growth is not necessarily dependent by the number of years that come into, that you bring with you. It's dependent on the value that bring onto the table. And that for me has been the largest, even for the team that I have, right? I would never claim that we are market leaders when it comes to compensation. If you go to some of the larger firms, you'll probably get, 10 to 15% higher than what we do. And that was the case when even I joined the company. But the pace of growth is a lot steeper here. So therefore, you sort of catch up a lot quickly than you would in any other organization, because the time that it would take for you to make partner, let's say in a big four, versus the time that it would take for you to make partner in someone like the GT would be lower, right? So you would definitely be able to catch up a lot quicker. So how do you ensure growth and people having clarity? And then the second thing is the partner to people ratio, right? So when I say partner, they're effectively your, so we have this concept what we call super coach in our organization. So super coaches are self-sustained small teams wherein every super coach has a team size 3 to 5 people under them who become their mentors and coaches, right? So when you talk about coaching, that culture of coaching is basically hand-holding people to be able to grow when you talk from culture, from a career perspective. So getting that personalized retention, at least that I have seen in my experience in the last 4 to 5 years, has really helped us contain some of the attrition. And that I would call a market differentiator, because I have a little bit perspective of having worked in a larger firm before as well. So those are things that have worked for me. And this is a very personal experience that I can share with you, which I don't know if that answers your question, but if I were to talk about about 2 things, these would be the 2 things that I would talk about, and I would talk on. Because if somebody is if the priority for someone is of course IT, so getting market leading compensation, then the expectation mismatch will always be there, because that's not what we are known for. We are known for the culture of growth, and that is the promise that I have seen organization deliver on. Right?
In fact, that answers a lot because
Yeah,
I was
I don't
asking
know
you
if
one
I
part
sold
and
you on GT, or I have put you against it. I have no idea.
that's for sure.
But
Yeah.
I try to answer as candidly and truthfully as I could.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Sure. Any other questions? Or I'm happy to take any questions that all of you might have offline as well. Happy to share my email ID with Sumit, or if you would like to connect on LinkedIn, wherever, I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Sure, I think the batch would really like that, to connect with you, so have some unanswered questions. So I think with this, I would like to request Shivangi, my batchmate, to please take the session forward.
Yeah, thank you, Amit. Hi, Ritika.
Hi, Shmangi.
So on behalf of the entire batch of PGDM at XLRI, I would like to thank you for taking out your valuable time and for such an interactive and insightful session, and enlightening us on what Grant Thornton does, the functionality and the applicability of HR advisories, and how it has effectively changed over times from transformational to being more strategic, and how important it is for an HR to understand all parts of the business to create strategies, and what are the current industry trends in HR, especially the adaptation of technology like AI in talent acquisition, and gamification in the learning and development area. And thank you for shedding some light on the real-time business problems, and showing us the path, like how we can apply our learnings to find a solution for them. So we would really love to
post some questions to you offline also, maybe, because I am sure batch has a lot of questions for you, as we are currently like learning about HR strategies in our current course. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shivangi, for having me, and many thanks for all those questions. I think great to see all of you came with your research, some hard-hitting questions, and I hope I was able to answer a few of them. Wonderful to have all of you here, and thanks for taking out the time on a Friday evening. Look forward to interacting with you, all of you.
Thank you, Ritika. It was really nice having you here.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Shivangi.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Ritika.
everyone. Have a nice evening. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ritika.